everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name's Ezgi and I'm a 28-year-old doctor and I'm currently on my A&E rotation. A few weeks ago I asked everyone on Instagram to send me some questions that they'd like me to answer on a Q&A, so here we are. So the first question is, did you ever suffer from medical student syndrome, and if you did, how did you deal with it? So for those who don't know, medical student syndrome is just a phrase that's said for students who, when they study a particular disease, they start to think that they have it. So they'll either interpret symptoms that they have in such a way that will fit that disease sort of profile, and then you start to get freaked out. I think for me it happened when we were on our neurology topic, and we were studying multiple sclerosis, MS, which is where basically your own body attacks your brain and then it causes various symptoms and stuff like that. And then I was interpreting everything as that, and I went up to my friends and I was like, oh, you know, I think I might have MS. And the way I got over it was them saying, no you don't, your symptoms really don't sound like that, get over it. And a week later things got better, or I don't know, I just didn't interpret them in that way, and yeah. So, and the second question I've got, sorry, I'm just reading like my questions from the laptop, is what time do you start and finish work? So it differs. So when I was doing my ward rotations, so my ward jobs, I would start around 8:30 and finish around 5:30. But that was different if you're on call. On calls are usually 12-hour shifts, and you do 9 to 9 in the morning or 9 to 9 in the evening. But now that I'm an A&E, my rota is all over the place, and literally I don't have a normal day. So most of my shifts are from 3 p.m. to 12 p.m. or they are night shifts, which is 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. and you do get a bit of the odd 8 to 5, but that's like never. So the third question I was asked is if I have any regrets going into medicine, and I would say no. And that's because I did medicine as a graduate student, so I had quite a lot of time before actually even applying for medicine to make up my mind, doing volunteering work experience, to really sort of get an idea of what it is like to be a doctor, and not just that, but the lifestyle, so the rota and the weekends and the night shifts and just the whole career and the education and everything like that. So I basically, if you watch my old videos, I didn't get into medicine first time round, and I had to apply as a graduate student. So when I had students in my lecture theatre or my group or whatever that would moan about getting up at 9, getting up early to come to 9 a.m. lectures and that sort of stuff, and I was like, wow, you know, there's so many people out there who want to do medicine and they just can't get in because of whatever reason, and you're there and you're not even appreciating what you've been given. Like, to be able to study it, there's like limited courses in the UK, to be able to even study it and get on one of these courses is like a privilege. And so you're just sitting there and moaning, and it would just irritate me, especially me, because, you know, I didn't get in first time round and they had. I don't know if that was a factor, but yeah, I appreciated every single day that I was in medical school. And then once I graduated, yes, the rota's hard, yes, you know, you sometimes miss out on social events and you miss your family and like your husband or whoever you're with at home, but it's one of those things where you sit back and you say, this is something I really work towards, and I'm privileged to have a job, and that job involves helping people. I know that sounds cliche, but yeah, I don't have any regrets, well, at least so far. So the next question is, what's the most difficult aspect in terms of being a doctor in your perspective? So for me, I've been a doctor for nearly 2 years, and the most difficult part is the level of staffing and the amount of things that need to be done in a certain amount of time, but the limited resources, especially if you're working as a doctor in the UK. We work within the NHS and it's quite tight, so we always have rota gaps, we always have nurses missing, there's not enough people to cover the rota, that means we're stretched, people are stressed. We all try to work together as a team, which is amazing because everyone just gets on and does things, but you know, when you're studying medicine, everything feels like, basically when you have a scenario, they're like, what would you do? And it's like, oh, I'd get the nurse to run this, and I'd get them an X-ray, I'd get them ECG, I'd get them a CT scan, and it's like, in reality, it's like the nurse is looking after 50 different people. So most often maybe you need to just go through the urine sample, you need to do the ECG, and the x-ray takes like 2 hours because there's a queue from A&E, and just stuff like that you don't really get told in medical school, and it's only something you experience when you're actually working. Some things that annoy me when I'm at work, and this is like, basically, I'd be sitting there and I'd have a stethoscope around my neck, I'd have a badge that says doctor on it, and I'll be in like smart clothing, so I'm not in a uniform, for example, like a nurse's uniform, and then I'll be sitting with like a male colleague or something. And I used to have this a lot with one of the sort of walk-in clinics, and they'd come up to me and they'd either think I was a receptionist, they're like, oh, I have an appointment. It's like, well, I'm not the receptionist, it's the lady sitting down there. I'm the one who says doctor and my stethoscope. Or basically people would just call me nurse. So even though I blatantly say, hi, my name's Ezgi, I'm one of the doctors and I'll be looking after you today, and then a few minutes later they'll be like, thanks nurse, or nurse, can you get me a cup of tea? And it's like, and this is true for like all ages, so it's not like elderly people and all that, so all ages, all genders will do that. And it's just really irritating that people assume just because you're the female in the team that you're automatically the nurse. I mean, the nurses are clearly in their nursing uniform. Nobody goes up to them and says, oh, doctor. And it's like, so I just get annoyed that when you're a female, they just automatically assume that you're a nurse. Not that I have anything like against nurses, and I love them and we work really well together. It's just that, like, why do you make that assumption just because I'm a female? So the next question I had was, does being a doctor get in the way of your relationships? So a bit of a background, I was dating my now husband whilst I was in medical school, and then I graduated and started as an FY1 doctor, which is the sort of foundation level year 1 from when you graduate, and that's when we got married. So does it affect our relationship? I would say no, and I would say that's because my husband doesn't let it affect our relationship. He is aware of what I do, he's grateful for the job that I do, he is understanding and knows my rota and knows that it's not in my hands that I have to work those hours. So we just sort of work together and just make plans. So when I'm doing night shifts or I'm doing late night shifts, he goes and meets his friends. When I'm at home, I do some of the like chores, and I don't know, go out to the bank, the post office and that sort of stuff. So we sort of work together in the household to get things done, and we don't, instead of seeing it as a hindrance, we just see it as something to work with and work towards, because this is just the way it is. You can't moan about it, you just have to accept it and get on with it. There's no point being sitting there and being like, oh, the rota's like this and that. It's like, you sort of know what you're getting into, so there's not much point getting yourself down about it. It's just, you know, just get on with it. The next question is, how did you fund your 5-year medical degree? So because I did medicine as a graduate student, I wasn't eligible for the tuition loans that you get for your degrees, and I was the first year that started to pay the £9,000 tuition fee. So I was a bit stressed and worried about it at the time. I'd saved some money during my degree because I'd been working, so during my first degree, so I put that towards my tuition fee. I took out a loan, a maintenance loan, and put most of that towards my tuition. And I was staying at home at the time with my parents, so I didn't have any issues with rent and that sort of stuff. The only thing I really needed to pay for was travel. My dad sort of helped me out with that. In addition to that, I did sort of little jobs here and there. So I was a mentor for first year students. Then I was working in the summer, so I worked as like a graduation ceremonies assistant. I worked in the cinema, I worked in a furniture store. So any free time that I got during my summer holidays, I would apply for jobs and basically try to make a 1 or 2 grand during that time period to put towards my tuition. And then in the UK, what happens is the NHS covers your final year of medical school. So I only really ended up paying for 4 years out of the 5, so that was a great help. I get asked lots of questions about holidays and how do holidays work. So as an F1 and F2, you get 4 monthly rotations, so you get 3 jobs. and within each job you are allowed 9 days of annual leave. If ever on the rota you are doing an on-call shift during a bank holiday, such as like Christmas Day and Monday bank holidays and stuff like that, you get that extra day in lieu, so you can get up to 10 days of annual leave. So it's very difficult to take those 9 days in a row, but if you do have the weekend before and you have the 5 days off and then you have the weekend after, for example, then you can get a good sort of 9 to 10 day stretch off, and that's usually enough for a holiday. I mean, you're not going to go on like a world tour and do hiking for like 3 months with this 9 days off. Next is, what is your biggest career regret? So my career is only 2 years. I've only been a junior doctor for nearly 2 years. And I don't like the word regret, because whatever you've done in the past or whatever decisions you've taken has brought you to where you are today. So I mean, I could turn back and say, oh, maybe had I not taken my gap year after sixth form, then I would have started medical school when the tuition fees were like 3.5 grand, and now I had to pay 9 grand, and now I've got a bigger loan. Maybe I could have turned around and said I should have tried extra hard and got round to doing medicine as a undergraduate student. Maybe I should have stress less. Like, there's loads of things you can come up with, but whatever you choose or whatever you say, whatever you regret, is what made you who you are today. So I know when you're going through them or when you're thinking about it, it's difficult, but afterwards, when you sort of come away from the situation, you do appreciate everything that's happened to you. So career related regret, not any at the moment. And the next question is, what did you want to do if you didn't get into medicine? So I always try to have a plan B, because that just mentally makes you feel a bit better if things don't go well. When you only have one plan and that flops, then it's always a bit disheartening. But I always said to myself that if I didn't get into medicine, then I'd do teaching. So I'm a very sort of social person. So when I was in my last year of my undergraduate degree, I did a research project, and that was basically in a lab where I didn't see many people, and I was working on my own, and literally I was so depressed. I was like, I want to see people, I want to work together with people, I want to talk, like what the hell is this? I just want to get out of this place. So I was so happy when my dissertation finished and I got my results, and I just fled. So the last question is, what annoys you most about patients? So there isn't something specific that annoys me about patients. You deal with loads of different types of people and loads of different characters. Some people are arrogant, some people are angry, some people are lovely. They give you lots of praise and then give you a smile before they leave, and it's just sort of like a roller coaster throughout the day. But there is one thing that patients do that really do sort of get on my nerves. And I think I don't think it's their fault. I think it's just that they're not aware of what to do instead. And that is patients calling ambulances to get into hospital because they don't want to either come in themselves, they don't want to pay for a taxi, or most importantly, they think that if they come in with an ambulance, they'll be able to bypass the system and bypass everyone in the waiting room and basically get seen sooner. And that doesn't happen. So basically, in my hospital, what happens is everyone that walks in by themselves and checks in at reception gets put into a waiting room, and that's called the minors area. And then you get triaged, and triage often takes about 10 minutes. So you get to see a nurse who takes a short history from you, does your blood pressure, temperature, that sort of stuff, and then prioritizes you on the list and then puts you into the waiting room for you to wait to be seen by a doctor. If during that triage process it's found that you are very unwell and you need a bit more observation and you need to be seen a tiny bit sooner, then you get put into the majors area. So minors and majors, excluding resus, I'm not going to talk about that because that's for really sick patients. So people who come in with an ambulance, they get put into an ambulance handover bay where the paramedics unload the patient, bring patients in with a stretcher, and then check them in at a different type of reception. And again, there is a nurse that triages these patients. She will go through the history, she will do the obs, so she'll do temperature, blood pressure, and all of that sort of stuff, have a look at the patient, have a chat with the patient. If the patient is not unwell, they get taken off that stretcher and put into the waiting room with everyone else that had just walked in themselves. And then what happens sometimes is those patients demand and they say, well, I came with an ambulance and I've been waiting for 4 hours. And it's like, yes, you came with an ambulance, but you weren't unwell. And unfortunately, you just have to wait with everyone else to be seen by a doctor. And I think it's, so I don't get annoyed at the patients more. Maybe we just need to educate people more and basically help them prioritize their situation. So we've had people come in with ambulances for hurting the side of their foot, or we've had people coming in with ambulances because they vomited 2 nights ago and they called their GP, and the GP said, you know, I think you should go into A&E to have some bloods and that sort of stuff. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to call an ambulance now because the GP said I need to go into A&E. Well, you are well enough to just walk in yourself, get a taxi, get a bus, you know, that sort of stuff. And it costs about £500 for an ambulance to be deployed to a patient and for them to come into hospital. So what that means is that often valuable money from the NHS is wasted. People who really need an ambulance, so really unwell patients or elderly people who just wait hours and hours and they actually physically can't come in themselves, are waiting for ambulances, whereas well people sort of are using the system as well. And yes, you know, the ambulance system does triage patients too. If you're really unwell, then an ambulance comes out sooner. But if we didn't have people who could just make their own way into hospital, that ambulance could get out even sooner. Do you see what I mean? So that's the only sort of thing that really gets on my nerves. When I see a patient in the minors department and I take out their file and I've seen they're coming with an ambulance for such a trivial thing, I just can't help but get irritated. So yeah. That's it for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram name is here. It's the Junior Doc. Please subscribe and like this video as well. And if you've got any other questions, then pop them in the comments below. And when I have a few spare minutes on my A&E shift, I'll get down and reply back to you. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.